in order for EZAnalyze to help you analyze your data quickly and efficiently, the data needs to be set up in a certain way, pretty much like a database format, which is pretty common in the business world. Basically, the data needs to be set up such that your first row contains your variable names, and then each row below that contains one person's data or one respondent's data if you're using a survey. With the example here, I have here below a sample survey that I just made up with 5 questions. First question is, what color is your hair? Going down to the last question, which is a multiple response type question where the person can actually answer with more than one response. So we'll go through them in order. A good practice, I think, to engage in is to have this first column here be an ID number. If you're using anonymous surveys and you don't have students' names or anything like that on them, you want to have some way of going back to your original data if you make a mistake while you're entering the data or something like that. So I like to have the ID number recorded here in the data set and then write the ID number on the paper survey, so that, again, if I make a mistake, I can go back and fix it later without having to throw out that data or redo everything. So that's the first thing, is that we should have an ID number there if it will help us. After that, each question typically gets its own column. So for this first question here, what color is your hair? I gave it a name of hair color in my data sheet. And then we have the choices here are red, orange, purple, or natural. And the way that I would code those is I would say red is a 1 in the data set, orange is a 2, purple is a 3, and natural is a 4. Okay, so that's the first question. That's how I would code it. You could technically type in the actual colors instead of numbers. The problem is that it's easy to make mistakes when you're entering the data that way, and it's much faster to just simply enter a single number than it is to type this whole color out. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is, what gender are you? Male or female? Again, we'll want to assign numbers to that, or you could also use letters if you like. M for males and F for females. Okay. The next question, question number 3, asks, do you own a car? Which is a simple yes-no question. I like to code yes-no questions as zeros or ones, 0 being no and 1 being yes. The reasons for that is that later on you can use this yes-no question as a dependent variable in some analyses with EZAnalyze. If you coded it as yes-no, the only thing you could calculate with that is some basic percentages. So it's more powerful if we code this one as numbers. So we'll go ahead and we'll say 0 is no and 1 is yes. This next question asks people if they like the Red Sox and asks them to agree on this 5-point scale going from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So the way that we'll code that is we'll code people who strongly disagree with that statement as saying that that's a 1, and people who strongly agree would get a 5 on that question. People who score in the middle or score neutral, people who said neither or neutral, in other words, would get a 3 on that. Okay. Now this last question is interesting, and it gives us a different way of entering the data into EZAnalyze. It's a checkbox type question where the person could circle all that apply. So while it's a single question, there's actually 4 different responses that the people could give. So to deal with that, the easiest way to do that is to create a column for each possible response. Okay, so if somebody said that they would like to meet Johnny Depp but not meet Hannah Montana, Johnny Damon, or Britney Spears, we would give them a 1 for any responses that they circled, and zeros on any responses that they didn't circle. If somebody circled all responses, they would get a 1 for all of them, and if somebody didn't circle anything, they left the entire thing blank, they would get a 0. Okay, so which brings me to something else that's interesting. What happens if you have somebody that fills in your survey but doesn't answer a question? The best way to deal with that is to just leave it blank in your data file. Okay, so the reason for doing that is that sometimes some database programs you can enter a 6 or a 9 or something like that, but for EZAnalyze is set up to deal with that if it's just left simply as blank. So with that, that's all that there really is to it, to setting up your data set. Again, for most types of survey questions we have, we're going to have one column for each question, with the exception to that being these checkbox type questions, where people can provide more than one response to the question.